Okay, Tara.
Vanessa.
I know we'll do the introduction. This is the introduction. I'm not reading the whole thing because it's Rachel Simmons.
Because this host needs no introduction.
Because this guest speaks for herself, including in her introduction. She introduces herself.
I meant this guest needs no. Wow. Middle age hitting hard within the first 30 seconds.
It's Friday afternoon, people, and we're all either perimenopausal or menopausal. So no judgment here. Actually, I shouldn't speak for you, Rachel.
Oh no, I just got some blood work back, and my nurse practitioner goes, "Well, you're well into menopause," and I was like, "Great, how's your day going? Happy holidays."
Did you want to cushion that with anything? No, you're just going to go straight for it.
Actually, putting that behind my name, just comma, well into menopause.
I think that's a good signature on email.
Well into menopause. Okay. So Rachel Simmons, who you all know, she originated as a girl world guru, author of Odd Girl Out, Curse of the Good Girl, her recent book, Enough as She Is. They're all brilliant and touchstones. And she has become a much coveted guru in the corporate world to improve the workplace for folks of all genders.
And just partly because inside, apparently, we might all still be teenage girls, including the men.
I think it summarizes everything.
Yeah. So it turns out there was a place for me. There was a place for me in global companies because it turns out we're all just still like little nesting dolls, and our teenage girls are out there still
inside, informing all of our choices. Although, as you all know, we encourage you to leave your baggage at the door, which is what Rachel does.
Leave your nesting doll inside.
Leave your babushka, matrushka doll.
Matrushka.
So leave your baggage at the door. Unless Rachel hasn't been to your workplace yet, and then she'll help you leave your teenage baggage at the door. But the reason she's here today is because this is kind of a newsy episode, Cara. We've kind of gone, of the moment.
Yes, we have. For an evergreen topic, we're going newsy.
We're going
you
newsy.
Want to tee it up? Do you want me to tee it up?
Can you make like a news background noise, like dee 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 dee?
We just recorded a podcast where they added a clapping that they inserted the clapping sound. And I was like, can I just have that sound follow me around all day long? And then I'll feel much better about myself.
Okay. I'm going to keep us on topic on this.
It's such a better episode when we veer swiftly.
I'm going to keep us on topic by describing how this newsy podcast, I was so head down in work over the last couple of weeks that I missed the news. So it was like a real news flash to me last night when I was prepping for this episode, and I read all the articles that, Vanessa often makes fun of me, Rachel, because for people who have a social media presence, I'm never on social media. So I miss all the social media information. And this was one very good example, but there was lots of Googleable information on it because, boy, has there been a lot to be said about this. So the controversy at hand, I'm going to give the 30,000 foot view, and then
you're going to give the news. You're going to give the news anchor intro, and then we're going to get messy. Go.
I am, but I don't have news anchor hair right now. Okay, my news anchor intro is cosmetics that are intended for adults are being purchased by tweens and teens. That is nothing new. However, in the land of social media, where organic marketing is everything and influencer marketing is everything, it seems as though there are some products that kids start to buy and follow recommendations for buying. And suddenly kids are using products that were not intended for them. And there are many cases, where the companies that make these products lean into this momentum because they've suddenly got a whole new consumer base that's buying their product. And so the dilemma is you got a product that's not for this younger body, and yet these younger wallets are paying a lot of money for it. And there's a real tension there. And so we're here to help everyone, adults, and if there are kids listening to this, the kids navigate what to do and how to figure out if a product that seems really, really cool is actually okay for you. How was that for my anchor?
It was good. I would
think?
just add to that. There's all sorts of layers of socialization about beauty and appearance and empowerment. And for Rachel and I, who have both I've spent a decade, Rachel spent 2 decades looking at the reality of tween and teen girls and their relationship to our society and expectations. It's hard to sit and look at these kids, these teeny tiny little kids putting on a ton of makeup and a variety of other things that make us feel like, what is going on? So let's start. I don't know, Rachel, do you want to start? We got an amazing listener question, which we will get to, but can we start top line in terms of like your gut reaction? Like we're going to be pretty raw and honest here. And we're all, I think, going to fall along a different points on a spectrum. But do you want to just start with your like gut reaction to this whole situation?
Yeah. And I probably should say by way of introduction that I'm a single mom by choice to an 11-year-old girl who I would say falls squarely in the demographic here of target market for what we're talking about. And I came into this just also like honestly, meaning by being dragged into Sephora. And I think that tends to be the place that TikTokers are talking about too, which we can also get to. And I was really astonished by how both versed in skincare she suddenly seems to be, and also like determined to make her skin look nice. And then as I started to inquire, I saw that many of her friends felt the same way. And then I started to read and see that this was a thing. And my gut reaction was, this is a gateway drug to makeup. And my gut reaction was, this is how a company or a marketer kind of ensnares a kid to become a consumer of products that are disproportionately marketed to and bought by women who are spending their hard-earned money on this. And my daughter's only 11, but what's it going to look like in 10 or 20 years? And also that is kind of training her to think about how she looks and to think about how putting products on and paying for those products will make her be more appealing and of value to others. So I realized that's like, we said we're going to be raw. I felt really raw about it. I felt the way I feel when I see a cheese stick at Starbucks that is probably being sold to a little kid who's eventually going to want like a dragon fruit tea, who's eventually going to want a cappuccino. Like, I think these companies have gotten extremely savvy and shrewd about how to appeal to the youngest consumers, who we also know from research, by the way, that girls are very influential consumers in their own families. And marketers know this as well. And this has been a very, very old factoid. So anyway, that is my initial gut reaction. And it's not like I want to be a party pooper. I don't. I just am really aware of how it starts very gently, almost so subtly that you think it's harmless. And then I think it quickly turns into something else.
Well, let's highlight the irony here for a second. The toe in the door product that's being sold to kids is a product or a slate of products that keep their skin looking clear so that they don't have to put anything to cover up their skin. They can walk out the front door with nothing on and their skin looks good. But you're describing it's a gateway to putting on stuff to cover your skin. So it's like this very funny, weird double-edged sword of beauty ideal.
And by the way, the gateway to makeup. So in my world, the 13-year-olds are wearing a really complex combination of makeup. They are wearing makeup that I didn't start wearing until last year at 46 because like we were on a book tour and I was like, oh, how do I cover the bags under my eyes? But they're wearing foundation and concealer and highlighter and contouring sticks and eyelash brushes, right? It's so many products. And on skin that is young skin that you never would have imagined when we were growing up that you would. I mean, I learned how to put on mascara at some point in high school, I think. Now, granted, I grew up in a town where like it wasn't a thing. And my friends who grew up in other communities were like, oh, I had an entire can of hairspray in my hair and blue.
Vanessa, it is not about town. I grew up in LA and I learned how to put on makeup from my now 20-year-old daughter when she was in this demo.
Right.
And when she was right. And to Rachel, to your point, this is not new. This is like just an exaggeration of its former self happening right now today. But like, yes, Vanessa, they do. They know more than we ever did. And frankly, than some of us actually do about all this stuff.
So here's my conundrum, Rachel.
Just to be clear, I'm still on what's a contour stick, but we'll come back to that.
Oh, you haven't gotten there yet.
No, I'm totally kidding. I couldn't help myself. Okay,
that's
101.
That's
in God's name is
to give me the illusion of cheekbones.
Okay, keep going.
So I hear your kind of raw unfurling of your reaction, and I feel it, and it resonates. And then there's a big part of me that's like, okay, like all we say every day is like, no shame, no judgment, right? Like I'm not going to make these kids feel like crap. I'm not going to judge these kids. I'm going to like feel my feelings. And then I'm going to figure out, like, I'm going to untangle all of those feelings. And I'm going to figure out, like, what is it about the kids? Because we can talk about how our society is demonizing tween girls in general, which is like basically a knife to my heart. And how much of it is like, that the influencer culture, and how much of it is social media, and how much of it is a creative expression where they're just at a point where they're developing identity and individuating, and how much of it is just like a phase that they move through. Like when I pull back from the judgment and I start to untangle stuff, it's not that the upset and worry isn't still there, but it becomes much more complex. And so I'm curious, Rachel, as you've been sitting with this, have you gotten to a place where there's parts of it where you're like, okay, like I get this, or I can see it, right? The non-party pooper parts of you, and which parts of you have gone deeper and more concerned as you've kind of sat with this phenomena?
That's good questions. Good questions both. So I did have a conversation with one of my kids' friends. Well, like when they're trapped in the car and they don't have a choice. So I was like, guys, what do you think about skincare? And, one of them was like, well, it's just for me. She said, this is just for me. It's not for anyone else. And I was like, tell me more. She's like, well, makeup is like, nobody can see, she said, that I'm wearing skincare. So it's not like I'm showing it off to anybody. And I was like, that is a really good point. Let me chew on that. And I actually thought she had an excellent point there. And that there is something, what it reminded me of, TBH? I one time wrote, many years ago, I wrote a short piece for Slate about why selfies are actually great. This was when the selfie first started, back when I was a young writer and the selfies just started. But I was like, everyone was like, selfies are bad for girls. And I was like, no, actually they're great because there's like this opportunity to show yourself off and to like advertise yourself. I think this was like pre-duck face. Anyway, I'm reminded of that because I think that's kind of a version of what this girl was saying, which is like, this is for me. It makes me feel good. Don't pathologize it. And it really stopped me in my tracks. So that has given me pause to answer your question. The second piece though, is like, what am I digging in more on? I'll tell you what I dig in more on, and I'll tell you how much this annoys my kid. It's teaching literacy about the culture.
Right.
Like you can spend your money on this. And I just want to remind you, how many boys do you see in this store? What do you think they're spending their money on? Boys aren't needing to like make their skin look a particular way, and their skin is not that different than yours. And of course, my poor kid is like, can I live for 1 minute? Yeah, Cara.
Okay. I'm raising my hand because I want to push back on the skincare. Boys don't spend the same on skincare. Boys don't want the same on skincare versus makeup.
Okay.
I think there's a significant difference. There has not been a lane for the classic male to shop for skincare until recently. But when we talk to teenagers, and I would argue for my entire career as a pediatrician, the gender has been completely irrelevant. All kids are desperate to avoid acne, and they can't avoid it. By the way, like spoiler alert, no matter how much fancy stuff you buy, no matter how much rubbing alcohol you wind up putting on your face, which dries you out instantly. And then, you can't prevent your future acne the way you're hoping you can, which is what the sales pitch is. But the gendered lane for boy skincare has only just moved from like a little narrow dirt road to more of a highway. And places like Sephora and Ulta don't cater to those customers. They don't have, it's like going to a bookstore and, like it just spins my head when you look at the types of books that are available in a bookstore for sale in real life versus online, right? Totally different. Makeup, very different scenario. I would argue that is still, even in this world where different expressions of self use makeup and it doesn't really matter, gender is irrelevant. For the most part, I would argue that makeup still is marketed largely to females, but there's a huge male skincare market. And I bet in the next 10 years, they lap girls in their consumption of these products. That's how badly they want it. And that's how testosterone messes with their skin.
Rachel, do you think that, I've had similar conversations with my poor children. And sometimes I'm like, is it my fault? Like, are they driven to do things and be interested in things and to spend their money on things and to care about things that I don't care about, or worse, I think are not good? Because like I've been talking to them about this stuff all their lives. And I've been talking about like, I don't know, self-empowerment, and it doesn't matter what you look like. Have I done this? Like, am I pushing them
You're
to
asking
Sephora?
if it's your fault. The answer is always yes. Obviously. Duh, it's totally your fault. I mean, look, I'm inclined to say I don't think we have that much power. I think my kid from the time she came out was like, where are the pearls? Where are the high heels?
She was fancy Nancy from the beginning.
Literally, if you have followed me on social media, you know that I have just looked at this child perplexed, like I don't understand. However, if you put her next to my mother, they're peas in a pod and could spend all day at the mall. So like, I think there's something to just like kids are who they are. But I do think if I can pull this thread out, Vanessa, there's a question about like, which battles should we fight? How hard should we push? And I think you touched on this earlier. And one thing I am learning is that I know this is cliche, but we really do have to pick our battles. And my opinion is buy all you want. I just want you to understand what it means to be a consumer in this country, in a global economy where you are part of the product that's being sold. Like you just need to understand that if you want to spend your allowance this way, have at it. Here's the other thing that I feel very strongly about as the mother of a girl, which is you got to play sports. So you can put on your acrylic nails and party down at the mall. Okay. And I'm not saying I didn't, but I am saying that I'm going to look at the research and I'm going to turn to and engage and leverage the other resources that surround this challenge that I know will create a buffer for her so that, and by the way, it's not lost on me that the kid has to take off her acrylic nails in order to go play basketball. It's not my fault. Coach said you had to anyway, but you see where I'm going here.
Yeah. I mean, it's not there's no pure response, right? This is a multifaceted, multi-layered issue, and picking your battles. Yes, but it gets so muddied and intertwined. And it's like, where does clothing choices run into makeup choices, run into behavior on social media and online, run into socializing options, run into, right. So we're going to come back to this sort of like, how the F do we talk about all of this? And how do we be in conversation with kids? And Rachel modeled a couple of ways. She's done it recently, which is locking children in a car with her and interrogating them under a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. Just kidding. But Cara, let's talk about the safety angle for a while, because with the skincare stuff and the makeup stuff, there are real concerns about their safety.
Yeah. And there are two buckets of safety. And I think we got to talk about this too, because we can all say, and I agree with you, Rachel, like you want to spend your money there, you go learn your lesson, right? But then there's like, oh, but they're spending their money on it and they're putting this into and onto their body. And now what's my role as the adult in their life? Like, am I okay with that? And there are two different kinds of safety that I think about. One form of safety is the physical sort of chemical safety. What is in this stuff that they are putting all over themselves? I mean, you can find a study showing everything. So like you want to go find lead in lipstick, easy peasy. Look it up. You'll find 20 studies. You want to find, how bad retinol is for an 8-year-old. Fine. You can find that data. I mean, we're not going to parse it all, but that's a concern. And by the way, the lack of transparency and labeling on all of these products adds a layer of ridiculous confusion because you can't even show your kid what's in something if it's part of a trade secret, for instance. So there's that chemical safety, I'll call it. And then there's, I don't know what to call it, sexual safety, physical, like forget the skincare and not having zits or minimizing your smile lines at 9. But, makeup ages them up. And suddenly, Vanessa and I spend our entire lives talking about how kids go through puberty younger and younger these days, and they look older than they really are, and how confusing that is. And makeup just doubles down on that, right? Suddenly you're looking at a 13-year-old and it is really, really hard to tell that kid is 13. Right. I mean, unless the makeup looks a certain way, but and then
you're like, oh yeah, they're definitely a little certain.
But when they're really good with the YouTube tutorials, so I guess the question here is, let's look at both of those safety buckets, right? So let's start with chemical safety and like, okay, what gives there? Like, how do you navigate with this sort of wanting your kid to learn the lesson about how they are behaving as a consumer in the world and just be wide-eyed to it? Now, what do you do when you put that hat on?
Yeah. So Rachel, how would you have that conversation? If you're going all global economics on your kid's ass, right? And you're like, dude, you are a pawn in a massive scheme that is manipulating you.
She literally is like, I'm never having a sleepover again. Like, mission accomplished.
Can you take your like Beyond Burgers and your lectures about makeup and like go somewhere else?
That is an excellent line. That is amazing.
I'm going to go home and make some homemade kale chips. I don't know. Cause like, I'm not a pediatrician. What do I know? I do know. I did say, so, okay.
This isn't a pediatrician conversation. This is how do we teach them to become cultural critics?
Right. Well, so I kind of want to go back to the piece about aging, because there is something really odd going on here to point out what Kara's saying, which is like, on the one hand, they want to look older. On the other hand, many of them are blatantly buying like anti-aging. And I want to tie this to, I don't want to go too far afield, but the phenomenon of 20-somethings starting Botox so that they never actually get a wrinkle, which almost reminds me of like starting hormones before you even begin puberty. Like there's a kind of manipulation now of life processes, of biological processes that this generation has access to.
Also, just spoiler alert, it doesn't work.
Which doesn't
it doesn't work. You can't, the aging, that one example, I think this might be very relevant to some people who are listening to this podcast. There are different kinds of wrinkles that people get, but the finest layer of wrinkles comes from sun damage. You can Botox all you want, but those very fine sort of crepe-like wrinkles, that's, thank you, sun damage. And you should be putting on the one thing your face needs, SPF. That's it. Like kids need to wash with soap, put a little moisturizer on and put sunscreen on. That is like the best anti-aging. So just a little side note that life hack that those kids think they're doing.
I think that is true. I mean, that is a very practical point. So for parents who are thinking, well, what should I allow? Definitely something with SPF.
Yes.
I just again, thinking about the bigger picture messages here, there is something like a way in which even our youngest kids are starting to develop a negative relationship with aging. Even while they're trying to look older, they're already learning anti-aging. And I just want to call that out because there's no way that's not going to have an impact on them. Just in the way that we all grew up in the 80s, fat free. Like words matter and words shape our mindset, our habits, our attitudes, our emotions, all those things. And so I worry a lot about that too, as somebody who thinks a lot about ageism now. And then I guess to your point again, and to go back to sort of the practical, I said to her recently, speaking as a parent, I'm like, you cannot buy anything with retinol. You cannot buy anything that has the word acid in it. Like it may be hyaluronic acid. My kid does have dry skin, and it is hard to dispute. And we live in a very cold, dry climate in the winter in New England. And so there's a part of me that wants to say, great, I'm so glad you actually do care about your face. I mean, how many generations of parents were begging their prepubescent or pubescent kids to wash their faces? So there's something funny here too. It's like, be careful what you wish for.
Right. Like self-care and hygiene and all of that. I mean, it's like the other extreme. So here's what I hear you doing. I hear you setting some boundaries based in information. Cara talks about the why, right? So you're giving her the why. I'm not always great at the why. Like, your butt cheeks can't hang out of your jean shorts. Why? Because I said so. And that's my rule, right? Like, there's no why there unless I want to go deep and dark into that. But I hear you setting some boundaries, right? Like, you can go to Sephora, you can spend your allowance, et cetera, but like, here are the parameters. Cara, your hand.
I'm raising my hand again.
Dr. Natterson.
Can you see my role in this triad? I raised my hand.
Right.
To that point, Vanessa, we should have a dermatologist come on this website to talk about which ingredient
podcast. You mean?
I mean, we should have a dermatologist.
That's where we are.
Ask our host, Rachel, about the website.
Right. Rachel.
That's right.
We should have a dermatologist come on this podcast and talk about specifically what ingredients are and are not safe for kids. Because there's also talk about shaming and blaming, a lot of shaming and blaming of ingredients that, just historically in the world of medicine and healthcare, we demonize certain things and we give certain things a massive pass. And the things we often give a massive pass are because they're natural or they grow out of the ground or they whatever. And they may be far more dangerous or toxic than the thing that is lab invented and actually quite clean and pure. So I think there are a lot of issues rolled into this topic that get confusing. And I want to just spin out so that we're taking it off the table. The question of sort of ingredient safety, we should cover that separately. But I want to go back to...
I think you just made people feel worse, by the way, that now they don't even know what is...
Well, we'll fix that on another podcast. We'll get to it. But you know what? It takes us back to just cleanser, moisturizer, and SPF, please.
No perfumes, gentle cleanser.
Yeah, you got it. But Rachel, you made a comment before that I just want to, before we move on to Vanessa's sort of very elegant framing, I just want to point out the irony.
Which I no longer remember, so it's fine.
Yeah, me neither.
But I do have a listener question that I want us to cover.
You talked about anti-aging, the anti of it all, which is so true. Like this whole like branding of anti-aging. And yet help me understand the trend from a couple of years ago where kids were dyeing their hair gray, because that was amazing. Because they live in this very anti-aging culture. And yet there are it's this same like tension between growing up and not wanting to.
I thought it was lavender. Was it gray?
Well, it was like a silver lavender, but there was a real gray. Like
I found it very calming.
It's just funny when you were saying the sort of push to anti-aging, I so agree with you. And yet there are sometimes things they do.
Like coastal grandma and grandpa chic.
There you go. Another excellent example.
Yeah.
Love a coastal grandma. Love a coastal grandma.
I know,
right?
But I feel like my body's not made for coastal grandma. It just makes me look like shtetl grandma when I try to wear coastal grandma.
It's like
I told you not to tie the handkerchief around
the babushka on my head. I know.
I told you that was not going to go well for coastal grandma look.
So I want to bring in an amazing question we got from a listener because we put out a call for questions for people when we figured out that we could hastily arrange this recording. I'm actually going to read the question because it's so good and it's so all-encompassing. And all the questions that get submitted are anonymous. So if you've ever wondered, unless you tell us otherwise, the question's anonymous. Hi, my 10-year-old daughter, who does not yet have a phone, has in the past year been swept up in a desire to have cool things that, quote, everyone else has. a Stanley, Aviator Nation, Lululemon, and skincare. I'm finding it very triggering to me because it makes me feel like she's following trends in order to fit in with others. I am also noticing that she's constantly talking about these things with her friends, and it all just seems so empty and superficial. I remember wanting to get clothing from the Gap as a child, but this seems so next level. Can you provide any words of wisdom to help me navigate this crap? I love how it's like this very elegant email. And then the last word, she's just like, I'm laying it all out there. So if we think about the makeup in the context of like trends and fitting in and social pressure and like what gets talked about around the water fountain or, you know, wherever kids gather these days in school, how do we address that? And how do we let them live? Because there's tons of dumb stuff we did when we were kids. And I'm sure our parents were totally appalled by us. Like, I don't know, EG socks and leg warmers. And I don't know, what else did we do that was ridiculous? So Rachel, how do we address that? Right? Because the initial thought is like, oh, it must be social media. It must be this. But like her kid doesn't even have a phone. It's just like in the air amongst her, I assume, you know, 5th grade friends.
Yeah. I mean, this is like a tale as old as time, right? Like a retail as old as time, if I may.
Are you going to start singing the song?
Such like a dad joke.
Car loves dad jokes. Keep them coming.
Well, retail as old as time. I just think that's part of the currency of social connection, especially as you both well know, in the middle school years. Like that's where materialism meets social status. And I think kids become both more aware of what's being marketed to them and the power that their consumption has to elevate or reduce their status. So I think they begin to pull the levers basically of materialism as a way to kind of leverage what's available to them. So I think that that's all normal. So the challenge is then, how do you want to be a parent in that? And I am definitely of the belief that bringing a complete hammer down is not going to do anybody any good. I think you both are too. So to me, it's about kind of boundary setting. And I think so a kid who wants and wants and wants and wants, like the parent's job is to say, you can have some, but you can't have all. And you need to make some decisions and take responsibility for what you want. And that might include looking online for a used Aviator Nation item that you might want, like on a site that sells a used item, or it might involve you working to make the money to buy something so that you have some responsibility for it. So that there are like ancillary rules or lessons that are available to teach a child in the midst of that materialism. I think you can be the broken record that says, look, I totally get that this is part of what goes on. And I remember my own leg warmer Benetton rugby. That's what it was for me, which was it was $50 in 1984. And my parents were like, no, we don't spend $50 on your clothing, which you're going to outgrow in 5 minutes anyway.
It was my most coveted. My most prized belonging was my Benetton rugby.
I'm so jealous of you that you had one.
It was a Hanukkah present.
Shout out to everyone who wanted a Benetton rugby and didn't get one. I'm right here with you. I feel
are you guys going to start a support group?
We're going to Hands Across America for
also Corky. Just saying.
Corky.
Oh, you guys are so young.
She's a little bit older than
I'm older.
A Corky?
Oh, older listeners, come to my side.
No, they've come back in
older
style.
Listeners, gather around the flame.
Corkies, like Dr. Scholl's. I wasn't allowed to have Dr. Scholl's clogs.
You cannot make that. They were worlds apart, Corkies and Dr. Scholl's. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. And
I'm gonna hit the Googs hard later on that and find out what that is.
I gotta say, when my kids were in their tween years, it was the ascent of brands like Supreme, and the value questions around these choices became massive because it wasn't just all the things you just listed, Rachel, but it was also this notion of the appearance of having spent a massive amount of money. So my kids would get fake Supreme t-shirts, and we were like, no, it messages to the world that you're wearing a, whatever it was, $300 t-shirt. Doesn't matter that you spent $5 on it. This is the message you're sending the world. I mean, it's all the same. It
Did
just
you
gets
walk behind them
amplified.
saying, I didn't buy them that. I didn't buy it. Because you're like, how does it reflect?
Like you think I
me?
let them out of my house in the t-shirt. On the other hand, I know 100% they left the house with the t-shirt.
Of course
and put
they
it
did.
on when I wasn't there because, right. But
So
it's this layered thing. Right?
I'll give you a perfect example of this sort of like seesaw of values and limits and where do you let it go? So Brandy Melville is a one size fits all company. And as someone who does not fit into many one size fits all clothing and also knows what it does to a person's self-esteem when there's one size fits all and it does not fit all your size, I told my kid that I was not going to spend money there because philosophically, I don't believe in it. So what does she do? She earns her own money and she goes and buys the shirts that she wants at Brandy Melville. And I don't say she can't because she's earned the money. She's made the effort. She can spend her money as she wants. But I never miss an opportunity to let her know that the company's not aligned with my values and I won't spend my own money there, which of course earns me the, yes, Mom, I am fully aware because you do.
Can I live?
Can I live? I love that line.
Literally, can I live? That's a big line in my house.
Can I live? With the chin tilt.
Can I live? It has to be like, can I live?
With like the up speak, which you love so much.
I mean, it's mostly me saying it, but sure. Yeah, totally.
So to our listener who wrote in, like, yes, it does seem next level because our entire culture is more consumer based. And even if your kid's not on a phone, maybe her friends are, or maybe she's getting ads on her iPad, or maybe she's in settings where other kids are more deeply steeped in consumer culture. And all you can do, I mean, there's a lot of things you can do. One of the things you can do is help her build the skills of figuring out what are the trade-offs I want to make? Where do I want to spend my money? Right? Because a parent certainly doesn't need to spend their money on stuff that their kid wants, but they don't want to buy for them, right? Either because it's prohibitively expensive or it doesn't align with their values or any number of factors. And yet you can have empathy for the fact that these items, these products have real currency in middle school world. And when I worked with a group of sixth graders and we talked about the topic of popularity for an hour, what was one of the things they said impacted someone's popularity? It was the sneakers they had. This was all kids of all genders. The kids with the cool sneakers were more popular.
So I think, though, we have to give people some tools to help them through because this is the world in which our kids are being raised. And actually, there's an economic layer that's complicated, but there's also just this very, very thick foundation of social media that is informing.
No pun intended.
Foundation.
Thick
foundation. Is it a?
I didn't even
news foundation.
I didn't even know. Oh no,
I'm sorry.
We got to give the name. We got to give the name. It's.
I'm so sorry.
Olive Sand.
Okay.
But there is this thick foundation of social media informing all of it. So independent of someone's economic ability is this, I would call, near universal standard now, right? And that's why we're all so steeped in it, because our kids are all exposed to it, whether or not they have social media. And I think this is a very important point. Whether or not they have social media, they're influenced by the images that ascend on social media because those make their way to the kids eventually. So I think we should each give some suggestions, some tactics that the adults can use to be able to leave the conversation feeling a little less helpless. I mean, especially because I already made people feel bad about all the scary ingredients and everything. So I'll just volunteer. I'll just volunteer to start and say, I think one great way through is to slow things down. So how do you do that? If it's a financial thing, then you just say, when you say you pay for it, and then they have to have a method to work for the money that they're going to use to spend it, or they have to save their allowance or whatnot, that effectively that slows down this rush to purchase. And it works really, really well in some houses. Another way to slow things down is if it's an ingredient issue and your concern is a safety issue, I would argue having them do some research slows things down. First of all,
and pisses them off.
oh, beyond. So they become really good at PowerPoints to convince you of anything. But I think that's like one strategy that's worked pretty well in my life. And so that's what I'm going to offer.
Rachel.
We all have to decide what is the hill we're going to die on. And I also just want to say, like, if you're out there being like, I don't know if I care that much, that's okay.
Right.
As long as you're setting boundaries in some area, maybe this isn't your thing. But I do think that one question to ask yourself is, if you're not saying no as much as you suspect you should be saying no, why? What is the thing that's holding you back?
Yeah, can I interject there? I think
Sure.
that's where everybody's a teenager inside comes in. Like, I find that parents will often quickly get to the place of like, when I was a kid, my parents wouldn't buy me the Benetton rugby. And so I'm going to buy my kid the insert whatever equivalent, not to use deeply personal and traumatic examples, Rachel, but I'll use that example. So figuring out what it's triggering in you and whether you're making the best choices you can still with that sort of reaction, or whether your own personal past and reaction is driving some decision making that you frankly don't feel so great about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that question of like, what are the things that most trigger us about our kids, and what do they have to do with our own unmet needs, our own unlived lives, our own fears that came to pass when we were younger? Having the resources and the horsepower to make your kid's life different than yours is like the dream and the mandate of every parent. But there's a way that can go sour. And so I think that it's worthwhile to just think about the deeper why of why you're saying no, or why you're saying yes, why something matters to you so much. But I do return to this question of helping your child. Like, you want to give them a foundation, again, a creamy foundation for literacy about being a consumer. Like, there's something really important about girls developing. This is an opportunity for girls in particular to develop financial literacy. Research shows girls tend to develop less of it for various reasons that then inflects who they become as women and how they manage money as women. So this is actually an opportunity to teach them to manage their money in a particular way, to teach them the value of money. Like, you can turn this around to make it something productive for them. And I guess in tandem with that, help them understand the bigger picture of what does a place like a Sephora or, an Ulta or any of these places, it's not to impugn Sephora or any one brand, but what is a place like this intending to do for its customers? Why are they primarily women? What does that tell us about some of the pressure that women are under? What happens to the women and girls who don't wear makeup at school? How do you feel about that? You should never expect your kid to be like, wow, I love this lesson, parent. Thank you so much, caregiver, for giving me this, walking me through this wonderful explanation and analysis. No, they're going to be like, ew, stop, let me let myself out of a moving car. I'm of the belief that like the stuff that most pisses us off that our parents tell us when we're younger is often the stuff as parents we're most grateful for later on. So if you're looking for like a high five, it's not coming. But if you do believe this stuff, then it is incumbent upon us as parents to, I think, transmit it to them.
We say this all the time, and I'm sure, Rachel, you say this all the time, but like, get curious. Like, find out what the hell is going on, right? Like, Rachel, you had this conversation with the trapped child in your car about like, and she said, the makeup's just for me. It's not for anyone else. And of course, my skeptical mind goes to like, oh, which TikToker said that? Like, who's she mimicking? Right. So like, I have to leave.
Dark.
I'm underneath all of this joy, Cara. I have a history of being a very dark, judgmental person. I know you would never have guessed it. But no, I think kids will come out with stuff that blows your mind. They will share reasoning. They will give examples. They will illuminate dark corners of their reality in a way that you never anticipated. And as Rachel said, they're not going to like do that every conversation. And they're not going to be like, oh, thank you so much. This is the best conversation. Like, often they're going to be like, go away. I just want to like do what I'm doing. But sometimes they blow your mind, and they will only do that if you give them an opportunity to do that. And you can only give them an opportunity to do that if you don't come down so hard and so judgmentally and tell them how embarrassing it is and how the feminism that you believe in doesn't support wearing makeup. Well, they're going to turn around and be like, well, isn't feminism telling me that I can be whatever kind of person I want to be? And if that person wants to wear makeup, then what's the big deal? Or I can wear whatever clothes I want. So stop judging my clothes, right? Like they are going to come back at you because they are savvier and more sophisticated in some ways than we ever were. And so I really try to get curious and interested, not just about the makeup or the clothes, but about Snapchat and Xbox and fantasy football and all the stuff that I'm like, this is destroying my children. And yet it's not, because they get up in the morning and they're happy to go to school and they see their friends and they run around and they learn stuff and all of that. So I am just trying to get curious. We absolutely love hearing your feedback and getting all your questions. So anytime you want to be in touch, email us at thepubertypodcast@gmail.com. If you're looking for great puberty products like the shorts or the socks or the bra, you get the theme there, go to myumla.com. If you want more content, you love what we do on the Puberty Podcast, and you want to have us come speak or learn more about our book or subscribe to our amazing newsletter, The Awkward Roller Coaster, go to orderofmagnitude.co. Remember, it's .co because we don't have enough money to buy .com yet.